Redline Logbook here for part 3 of the Hestia familia. In part 2, I discuss all of Lily's backstory and her meeting with Belle. As such, I had to skip something very important, which is Freya's involvement with Belle at this point as well, and the development of magic. So while Belle was getting to know Lily, he was slowly getting stronger, and Freya saw notice of this, but wasn't satisfied. She decided this was a time that he needed magic, and so she, while using Seer, was able to give him a grimoire. A magical book that if anyone reads it, it grants that user the ability to use magic, or it gives them an extra spell slot. This kind of grimoire was meant to give the user magic. We also learned, depending on which version you're going with, because there's the novel version, the manga version, and the anime version, I'm assuming the author's constantly changing up who he wants Belle to aspire to. I say that because the grimoire asked Belle, why do you want magic? And Belle's response is, I want to get stronger. In one version, he says he wants to get stronger to impress eyes, but in the more modern ones, in the anime and the manga, so I'm going to assume that's the more updated version that the author thought of, he says he wants to make his grandfather proud of him. And so he wants a heroic magic, one that can save the day in an instant, one that's like fire. And so that's why Belle develops Fireball. It is an instant magic that's super fast and doesn't require a chant. The grimoire fulfilled his very desire, his very wish to have magic so quick and so fast that it would help him become a hero faster. Now, with his magic, and with Lily by his side, finally getting past all of her stuff, the two of them were off to explore the dungeon, and Belle's #1 goal at the moment was still to become stronger so he can stand next to Eyes. Freya still was not satisfied with Belle's growth. No, magic wasn't good enough, and the reason why magic wasn't good enough, because while it did make his soul shine brighter, there was still a little bit of mugginess, grayness to his soul that she could see, and that was the undying fear of the Minotaur. Freya didn't know how to undo this, so she actually asked Otter how Belle would be able to get past this fear, and Otter straight up said he has to just face his fear head on. And so, Freya, being the sadistic woman she is, orders Otter to train a Minotaur to fight Belle, so he can kill it and overcome his trauma. Luckily for Belle, around the same time is when he was finally able to get a proper introduction with Eyes, his hero, and she actually, impressed by his growth, offers to train him. Because while Belle was getting physically stronger, he had no talent combat at all. He had no fighting style, he had no way of doing things other than just rushing in and slashing at everything that moved. I saw this and was afraid he's going to get himself killed early on. She also had her own reasons, but we'll get to that on her video. And so, Belle and Eyes, in secret, decided to train with each other for an entire week. As you'd imagine, this led the two of them to get a whole lot closer than they were before, and Belle didn't just see Eyes as a love interest, he now saw her an actual friend that he could connect to and spend time with, that he could trust, he can count on, he can ask for help when he needed. And she, in return, did the same. Now, obviously, Eyes doesn't need help from someone weaker than her, but she could count on Belle to be a mental stability for her. Because Eyes came to the realization that Belle was probably the only pure person left in the city. Pure in the sense that no matter how much struggle or death or suffering or pain he went through, he still smiled, he still had a light in his eyes, he still was a person who was just glowing in the darkness. And it becomes even more clear for her later on, but once again, we'll get to that. The two of them built a genuine connection to one another, where they actually wanted to spend more time with each other. Obviously, they couldn't because they were from rival familias, and that's a no-no. But in the meantime, the two of them were just happy training together, Eyes knocking Belle unconscious accidentally because she couldn't hold back, giving him a lap pillow, waking up freaking out, happy that he got a lap pillow. But all the way there, Belle slowly became stronger, and Eyes grew to respect and cherish Belle's light. And so with Belle's and the Minotaur's training finally coming to an end, that is when the two met. Funny enough, their meeting was actually a little early. See, the plan was to set up the fight directly between Belle and the Minotaur so there would be no interference. But Ishtar hates Freya, and so Ishtar's Amazons attacked Otter while he was currently transporting the Minotaur box above ground. It's when Convoy, the buck that he is, those rare drop items from the lower floors, the Minotaur slaughtered him and his two friends. But more importantly, the idiots released a Minotaur in the upper floors, and it just went around killing level 1 adventurers and low-level monsters. And before Otter could catch the thing, Belle and Lily happened to stumble upon it, and Otter took this opportunity to say, fine, You just fight here. And he just left. Bell, of course, was frozen by fear because of the Minotaur, and Lily actually had to save his life in the first attack. This ended up causing Lily to take most of the damage when the ground was shattered from the attack. Bell's original plan was basically to have Lily run away while he distracts it long enough for her to escape, and then he could escape. But then he realized it would go after whoever's weaker and slower, which was currently Lily, about to pass out from her wounds. As such, Bell basically resigned himself to die, and he basically just struggled on fighting against it, dodging its attacks, and just doing everything he can to not be, hit a single time. Because one blow and Bell was dead. Luckily for Bell, the Loki familia was on an expedition. Lily found them, asked them for help, and led them there. And so all the executives of the Loki familia, except for Garth, were able to witness the fight between Bell and the Minotaur. Originally, Eyes was going to kill it on her own. She even told Bell that he did a good job and that she'd handle it from there. But that is what led Bell to awaken something inside of him. After all the training he did with Eyes, after all the hard work he went through, after everything he experienced up to that point, he realized he was still weak and that he was never going to catch up to her if he has to be saved by the woman he loves again. But more importantly, Bell remembered a dream that he's had for his entire life, and that dream is to be a hero. To be a hero in the Danmachi universe isn't just someone who goes out and saves people or fights monsters. No, a hero is someone who generally does something spectacular, someone who accomplishes a great deed that no one else could imagine. As such, most people consider heroes of the past a fairy tale, not someone of a modern day, not someone of an adventure who goes in and just does a routine job of slaughtering monsters and has to see the horrors of this world. But of course, Bell is different. He still has that light in him. He still has that desire to do that very thing, do great deeds in pursuit of what is right, and face darkness head on instead of becoming part of that darkness. And so Bell chose to fight the Minotaur one-on-one in what has to be one of Danmachi's greatest fights. It took everything Bell had, but he was successful in killing the Minotaur. He even lost consciousness. This led to two major things. One, he won the respect of the Loki familia executives, which would then become a great ally for him in the future. And it also gave him his second skill, Argonaut. This skill manifested because of his overwhelming desire to be a hero. Argonaut is an ability where he's able to charge his mind, which is magic power in this world. So it charges his mind and allows him to unleash it in a big attack, either with his firebolt, making a giant fireball attack, or he can infuse it into his body or a weapon. If he infuses it into a weapon, excluding the Hestia knife, that weapon will shatter into a million pieces when used. And if he uses it at full charge in his fist or legs or anything like that for an attack, it could cause his bones to break, or at least crack. And this also fulfilled what Freya was looking for. It allowed Bell to surpass that block in his mind, that block on his soul that it wouldn't allow him to progress forward. And so, Bell made it to level 2. And we actually do get a little bit more information on Bell's relationship with his grandfather, because after the defeat of the Minotaur, Bell has a dream, which is actually a memory of the time he was attacked by goblins as a small child, and Zeus saved him. Bell asked his grandfather if he became a hero like in the stories that he would read to him, would he be proud of him? So yes, this makes it very clear that the person that Bell wishes to impress the most is his dead grandfather. Well, he thinks is dead. Now, when this ordeal was all said and done, Bell needed a new set of armor, and because the last set of armor he bought was created by Welf Crozo, his desire was to find a replacement set created by the same craftsman. Bell went to the exact same shop that sold the last pair of armor that he bought, and while looking for a new set of armor from Welf Crozo, he meets the man himself. To talk about Welf, we actually have to go back several thousand years, to a man named Crozo. Crozo was an ordinary man who ended up just saving a spirit from some monsters. Crozo was fatally wounded during this fight, and so the spirit, to save his life, gave him some of her blood. This gave Crozo access to magic, but his descendants throughout the centuries were unaffected. It didn't matter at all. That is, until the gods descended from the heavens. The first Crozo descendant to receive a blessing from a god was granted a skill known as Crozo Blood. This skill allowed the user to create a magic sword without a blacksmithing skill. But even more than that, these magic swords were on par with the same level of power as a spellcaster's magic. Magic swords should be nowhere near that powerful. They should be pea shooters in comparison to a massive cannon that is a spellcaster, but not the Crozo swords. They were artillery in themselves, and so the Crozos were picked up by the god Ares, and he used them to create a kingdom called Rakia, which was able to conquer mass swaths of land by obliterating their enemies with Krozo magic swords. Any gods that were defeated by him were forced to sign a pact with him specifically that they could not break, and as such were now his underlings. And so as Rakia expanded, it continued to destroy everything in its path, including elven forests. Now, many spirits live within these elven forests. As such, they got pissed off not just at Rakia, but at the Krozo bloodline, and so they cursed the blood of the Krozos. All but a few dozen Krozo swords immediately then shattered, and the Krozos lost the ability to forge new ones. As such, everyone who hated Rakia for burning their kingdoms and homes and villages immediately attacked back, forcing Rakia to surrender and give up most of their territory. The Krozos were blamed for this unjustly and went from a high nobility to low nobility within the kingdom, and their entire bloodline was then passed over to one of the gods that was subject to Ares, Phobos. Phobos, a female god who really hated Ares, but at the same time didn't really care. She was happy just to drink and eat and just live her life, and so she happily took on the Krozo families. Eventually, Welf was born within this bloodline, and he grew up forging standard normal swords with his father and grandfather, who would spend every day from sunrise to sunset beating metal into swords and shields and armor. Welf really respected his father and grandfather and their belief that for a man to be considered a craftsman, to be a forger, he actually has to put care into his weapons and his armor and everything he does, and that he should show respect to his hammer and his forge. In fact, this was such a big deal for the Krozos. Originally, you had to learn how to forge a sword using your own physical body before you were granted a god's blessing that would give you super strength. Welf lived his life as lower nobility within the kingdom. As such, he was treated like shit by pretty much everybody, except for the king's son, who actually respected Welf, because the king's son also didn't respect his own father, nor did he respect Ares. He saw them both as idiots, which they were. And because they were lower nobility, his family didn't really spend a lot of time with the royal family. As such, the one person that treated Welf well, Welf couldn't really spend time with him, leaving Welf friendless. And so Welf focused all of his attention on his swords and just working. When it was finally time for Welf to get his blessing, something miraculous happened, or in Welf's case, he saw it as a curse. He had the ability to make magic swords. Welf hates magic swords, not because they were used to kill people. He's not concerned about that. His main issue is he was taught to respect the weapon and armor that he forges. These things are supposed to last and survive and keep going alongside the hero that's fighting with them. They're supposed to be a partner. Magic swords, when the magic runs out, they shatter, they break, they turn to dust, and they abandon its user to die. And so Welf saw this as a betrayal of a craftsman to create magic swords. Didn't matter. His father and even his grandfather forced him to make a magic sword to be sure that these were the true Krozo magic swords. And they were. The flames that came off it were enough to obliterate an entire field. When word got to the king and Ares, it was then decided that the Krozos would move from Phobos' familia back to his. And so this way, Rakia would be able to regain their glory. Welf's parents were excited, especially his father, but of course Welf had no interest in this. Welf immediately ran away. Now, Phobos, knowing the boy as well as she did, actually caught him in the act of slowly running away. Now, he assumed that she was going to try to stop him, but she didn't. She actually wanted him to escape. She wanted him to live a happier life. And so, she didn't just allow him to escape. She made sure to misdirect everyone to go in the wrong direction. She even stole and gave him the magic sword he forged, so he can then use it to escape. With her help, Welf was successful in escaping Rakia completely and going off on his own. But as he looked back, he could see a god being ascended back into heaven. So yes, as punishment for her betrayal, Ares killed Phobos. To this day, Welf actually still regrets that, and sometimes even prays to her up in heaven, asking if she's proud of him. Welf ended up in a blacksmithing city, where he took up an apprenticeship with one of the blacksmiths. The blacksmith was connected with Phaistos, and so, after exchanging letters a few times, Phaistos herself came to visit Welf. Their relationship started off a little rocky, where she was demanding that he go with her, while he had no interest whatsoever, because he had no interest in creating magic swords. But she was able to convince him that she would never force him to make any magic sword, but there's nowhere else better to learn how to be a forger than with her familia. Welf agreed and joined her familia. She then showed him a sword she created, When Welf saw it, he realized it was the most beautiful thing that was ever crafted ever by a smith. And because they're down on Earth, a god can't use any of its divine abilities, so that was done with sheer blacksmithing skill. This led Welf on two paths. One, falling in love with Hephaestus and desiring her to be his wife one day, and two, wanting to prove that he is her equal, no, her better, by forging a weapon even greater than the one she presented him. And he continued on as a member of the familia for several years until he met Bel. Bel and Welf hit it off almost instantly. The two of them had a mutual respect for one another. Unlike every other person that would meet Bel in his life, who would see him as a hero, Welf sees Bel as a brother. The two of them are partners. Bel is the warrior, Welf is the blacksmith. One makes the weapons, the other one fights with those weapons. And they basically have a permanent connection with one another where they will trust each other no matter what. Bel will always trust whatever Welf forges, and Welf will trust that Bel will always keep his word as a man. Well, it took a little bit longer to convince, but she eventually got on board with Welf as well. Main reason being is that she realized that Welf was a good support for Bel. So they would continue to go out to the dungeon together, adventure, collect some items, keep doing this over and over again for a while, until Lily's landlord, the gnome man, got sick, and so she had to take care of him. Welf and Bel decided not to risk going into the dungeon without their supporter, and so they decided to spend a day together, where Welf basically explained the history of the Crozo bloodline, his anger and hatred of magic swords, and just generally the stuff he felt he could trust Bel knowing. And so, with the rabbit, the squirrel, and the hammer all together, they decided to take on their biggest challenge yet, the middle floors. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, give it a thumbs up so you can enjoy more Danmachi and other main things. Thank you, and have a great day.